Hello, this is Praveen. Welcome to .NETgurukul.com to C Sharp training. Today is Module 1, Session 6, Part 2, Working with Arrays. Here is the agenda items, like in terms of working with arrays, Part 2, we will see different types of arrays. Like we have single dimensional array, multi-dimensional array, jagged arrays. Okay, so we will try to know each and we have seen like in terms of single dimensional array in your previous session. So in terms of multi-dimensional array and jagged arrays, we'll try to know how do we define those and declare those values into this particular array elements, and how do we access and iterate through that particular arrays in terms of the multi-dimensional and jagged arrays. Okay, and we'll also go through some hands-on lab as well. Okay, so let's get started. Here is the single dimensional array, which we already know. Let me connect to my tab and explain you the types of arrays in detail. Yeah, it's got connected. Okay, so in this session we will know what are array types. Array types, we have three different types. Like one is single dimensional array. Single dimensional array we have already seen, okay, in your previous session. And multi-dimensional array, second one is, and the third one is the jagged array. Okay, in the single dimensional array you will have something in this particular format: one row, multiple columns, right? So in this particular thing, like you already seen, like in previous example, like we stored some numbers and we accessed through that particular index, right? These are the values. Okay, and each particular cell value has some index value, right? So those are nothing but the indexes, and we have something called starts with 0 and 0 plus n, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so here are the list of indexes that we come across. This is nothing but the indexes. And how do I find the length of this particular single dimensional array? Using array.length, correct? So the array variable name dot length will give us the length of that particular element. So here is the length is 5. Totally it has 5 cells, right? So it has number of elements 5. So how do I iterate these particular values? Using this particular length value, right? For int I is equal to 0. So here the value is, the first value is 0 and last value is 1. So I'm iterating through each and every value cell through this particular, starting with I is equal to 0. Then I less than a dot length, and then I plus plus. So in this particular format, and I am just console.write the value of ARR or I. So in this particular thing, I am displaying all this particular elements, correct? So you are using AR.length value, and using this particular length value, you are iterating each and every value. So the first value, it will be the 0, right? So it is going to give the 0th value, which is nothing but the 10. The second iteration, it will give you 1, which is nothing but this second cell value, which is nothing but error of 1 will be again 20. And similarly, all those particular till fourth element. So it will return all this particular 5 list of elements, which is nothing but 1 to 50. Okay. So this is the single dimensional array. In terms of multi-dimensional array, it is like a matrix. It's like a table with rows and columns. Okay, something like this. Okay, here on the top, it is like the columns. Here it is the rows, and each cell is represented with each of these particular rows and columns, or each cell is represented something like this. Okay, here the 0th column, one column, two, second column. And here is the 0th row, and here is the first row, and this is the second row. Okay, and each cell is represented something like this: the 0th row and 0th column. So each cell is represented by row, comma, column. Okay, I hope you understand this. Like, it is representing with respect to rows and columns. Okay, so here it is 0, what does it mean? 0, 0. It is like the 0th row and 0th column. Okay, and here it is 0th row and first column. Okay, and here is 0, 2. So here is the first row and 0th column, right? 1, 2, and similarly 1, 1 and 1, 2. Here is also the same thing: 2, 0, 2, 1, 2, 2. And the cells of how the cell value can be something like 10, 20, 30, whatever the values we have. Okay, some x values. So each and every that particular values of this particular cell value is accessed through this particular row, row, column. Okay, now how do I iterate these values? By getting this particular row length of this particular row and the column. So how do I do that? So let me do that. Okay, for int I is equal to 0. Okay, I less than arr dot get length. You have something called as get length. Okay, get length of 0 will give the length of this particular rows. Okay, and I plus plus. So first is like to get the length of this particular row. So okay, so AR got get length of 0 and AR of get length of 1, which is nothing but the columns. So this rows will give me 3, and it will give here, it will give me 3. Okay, so it is iterating each and every value. So take another for loop with j less than a of get length of 1 j plus plus. Okay, so nothing but I'm getting, so the first time, like, here is the rows, right, and here is the columns. Okay, console dot write line arr of I and I comma j. Okay, so I hope you understand, like, how do we get the length of this particular. Here when I say get length of 0, it will give me the length of these rows, and get length of 1 will give me the length of the columns. Okay, so first row when it is coming, so like it will have the 0, and here it will be 0. First it will have the value is like the 1. The value of rows is 1 0, right? So it will go and 0, and it will come to the j value. J time, the first time it will be 0, and it will be first it will be 0, 0, something like this. Again, the second one is like 0, 1 and 0, 2. So each and every value is printed through this particular cell value. Okay, error of that particular 0 I comma j. Okay, something like 1, 0 second time, and it is this, but once this inner loop is completed, so it will go with the second value again. Okay, the second value is again 1. Okay, so 1, 0, 1, 2, again everything the stuff again. So similarly, all this stuff goes on. Okay, so when it comes to the jagged array, you do not have a fixed length. You do not have the fixed length of the rows. Okay, some, it can be zigzag, something like this. Okay, in the first one, like, let's say it has 3 columns. Okay, in the second cell, it can have anything, like it can have 2. Okay, it can have 1. Okay, this is nothing but the jagged array. Okay, something like I wanted to, here it is columns. The column starts with 0, 1, 2. Here it is rows. Row starts with again 0, 1, 2. Okay, and each cell is like dependent with the rows comma column. So 0, 0. Okay, 0, 1, 0 comma 2. Here it's again 1 comma 0, 1 comma 1, and 2 comma 0. Okay, something like this. And each value can be like 10, 20, 30, or whatever the numbers we have. It can have these values. So how do I iterate these values? I'm going to write over here in the loop for jagged array. Okay. The first thing is like we need to find the number of the length for the first row. We can find by using the AR dot length, right? The length of rows ARR dot length. So it will give 3. But the value for the length that for each row, the zeroth row is 3, and for 1 and 2 it is like 2 and 1 is 1, right? So it is variable, like it is not going to be fixed. It is dynamically changing. So we also need to find this dynamic way of finding the length of that particular row. Okay, so nothing but I'm going to explain that in the for loop. Okay, so first I'm going to find this particular length for int I is equal to 0, I less than AR dot length I plus plus. Okay, so for here it is loops loop through rows. Okay, it is straightforward here. Here we need to have a dynamic way of finding the length of the particular next row. Okay, int j is equal to 0, j less than ARR dot get length of I plus jj, and console dot write line ARR I and j. So in this particular way, you can find this particular, here it is like iterating through all cells. Okay. Uh, I hope you understand in terms of looping this each and every multidimensional array and jagged array, since we already know about the single dimensional array. Okay, so here it is like in single dimensional array you are finding the length of the rows and the columns. So here also you find this particular length of the rows directly through the first get, ar dot length, and here get length of I, instead of saying 1 or 2, like I'm just passing the I value dynamically. Okay, so the first time it is like after it is finding the value of 0, the length of 0, nothing but 3. So the first nothing but 2. So sorry, it is first time it is going to get the I value is 0, and it is giving the length of 3, and it will return 3, right? So it will print all these values with 0 comma 0, 0 comma 1, and 0 comma 2. Okay, second time this particular I value will be 1, so the length the second time will be 2. Okay, so it will return these two values. So the third time this particular length value will be 3 or 2. So the length value will be 2 again, the I value will be 2, and the length will be 1. Okay, so that way it will all the retrace values. So if it is confusing, so I can take the demo, I can show you on the screen as well. Okay, so here if you can see this particular number. Okay, so each and every but the index value we will find through numbers dot length. Okay, and we can say console dot numbers of that particular I. So in the multidimensional array, it's like, if you can see, it's like a table. It's like a table, like if you wanted to store this particular usage of this particular multidimensional array, is like you wanted to store the grades of each student. See here, see, you have the grades of student 1, student 2, student 3. So I wanted to print all this particular thing, like I'm iterating through the rows and the columns through finding the get length of the rows. Okay, so first it will go and find this particular get length of this particular 3 rows. Okay, so it is going to give me 3 here, and it is going to give me 4 here. Okay, 4 columns. So here it will give me the 3, and it will here give me it's 4. Okay, and it's through all the values. Okay, Similarly, like here is the jagged array. Like jagged array is like, for example, in it is not fixed, right? So for example, like this particular thing in employee one has worked for 5 days. Okay, employee two has worked for 3 days, and employee two has worked each day 6 hours only. Okay, so I'm just telling you the usage of this particular jagged array. So the usage of this particular jagged array is something like if it is not fixed. So in this particular case, like employee one has worked for 5 days and he worked for 8 hours in this particular 5 days. Okay, employee two has worked for 3 days and each day he worked for 6 hours. So employee three has worked for 7 days and each particular he worked for 9 hours in each day. Okay, so I can iterate to the values just by finding the length of this particular first elements and first row, and iterate and have this particular dynamically of getting the length of this each and every length of each row dynamically and iterate those particular values. Okay, so let me connect to my Visual Studio. So this is very straightforward. So I'm just taking this. So if you can see here, I have numbers from 1 to 50. I'm just writing here console.write line. Single dimensional array. So here we have find the length of this particular thing. So it is the length is 5. So it is going to iterate to all these 5 elements, right? So and I got these particular 5 elements. Okay. Similarly, for your multidimensional array, see you can initialize something like you can mention the number of rows and the number of columns. Okay. So in for iterating, iterating this particular values, first you need to find this particular length of the rows and length of the columns. Okay. For that, I have something called as get of I, get length. Okay. I have get length. So if you wanted to test, like you can test with something like this. Get length of 0. Okay. Get length of 1. So this get length of 0 will give me the number of rows. Okay, nothing but 3. Here it 1 means it will return 4. Okay, so it is getting here 3 and 4, and it is returning through I and j value to get this kind of a cell values. Okay, 0 comma 0, 0 comma 1, 0 comma 2. Okay, and all this stuff. Okay, see here I got all the, if you want me to write in an for neat format to make you to understand better visibility. Okay, multidimensional array. Okay, so I hope you understand this particular loop. First before looping that, I'm just going to print this particular length of this particular rows and columns. Okay, so 3 and 4, I got the 3 and 4. I just wanted to get this particular I use this 2 to iterate through all the length items, okay, through I and j variables. Okay. Okay, if you can see, I got all the elements in this particular multidimensional array. Okay. Similarly, for the jagged arrays, like you have something else. Jagged array. Okay. You have something like this. And I just need to find first the length of this particular rows. Okay. First, it is finding the length, something like this. Okay. So you already know this will be length will be 3. So nothing but here it is 3. For this j, so the length is undefined, like it can be 2 or it can be 4 or it can be whatever it can be, right? Okay. So I can take that particular j length of this particular inner loop using this I variable as a dynamic value. Okay. Let me run through this. See, now that you have the jagged array and you have displayed all these particular elements. Okay. So you have displayed all the elements. And for the multi-dimensional array, you have displayed all the elements, okay, using this particular length values of using get a length. Okay, here we have just used length, number, just length, single, it's a single dimensional array. So you have the get length for each and every rows to find this particular get length, and we got the exact output. Okay, I hope you understand. So here is the way that we work with the types of single dimensional array, multi-dimensional array, and jagged arrays. So you understand, like in terms of the storage structure, and the cell values, indexing values, and how do we iterate. Okay. So you can iterate this particular same using the loops, for loops or while loops or for each. And similarly, like for in the multi-dimensional array, try to know how the particular it stores in the memory, like with respect to the cell values. Okay, something in this particular rows and the columns. Okay, and try to know how do we iterate those values. Okay, now that we have used for loop, but we can use while loop, and you can also use for each loop also. For each is just it will display all the elements. Okay. Okay, but in the jagged array as well. Okay, try to identify how it is being initialized and how the cell format is memory storage, and how this particular each cell is represented in your index. Okay, so how is particular each cell through the indexes, and how this particular thing has been repeated. Okay, how this particular array is being iterated. Okay, using this particular rows and the columns representation in the cells. Okay, so that's it for this particular types of arrays. It's quite straightforward. And in the next session, we will go through the next session working with methods. Okay. So let's catch up with the next session. Thank you.